Good morning, everyone who is joining us. Just to let you know, we will go live with our panelists in just a few moments. So settle in and get your questions ready, and we will be with you shortly. Good morning, everyone. If you have come for the Samaritas Refugee Roundtable, you are in the right place. We are glad you're settling in and preparing for our webinar, and we will be with you in just a few minutes. Good morning, all. We will be starting in just a few moments. Please start preparing your questions. We look forward to joining you at 11. Good morning, everyone joining us. Our Samaritas Refugee Roundtable is going to begin in just a moment. Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Cynthia Canty, and it is indeed my honor to be here with you on behalf of Samaritas, leading this important discussion today on World Refugee Day, as we explore what is going on with refugees here in Michigan. Before we dive in and meet the panel and start our conversation, I want to take a moment to remind you that Samaritas values the time you're giving us by being with us today, and certainly values your thoughts and your questions. So please feel free to give a question or a comment to any of the panelists. All you have to do is use Zoom and click on the Q&A button right there at the bottom of your screen and submit your questions. We have assembled a great group of experts who have worked very, very hard in the field of supporting refugees and foster care, certainly helping those refugees who have made the very, very long journey to Michigan. So let us meet them now. We begin with Ben Kavanaugh, who is Deputy Director and State Refugee Coordinator, Office of Global Michigan with the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. As State Refugee Coordinator, Ben has the responsibility to ensure coordination of all public and private resources for refugee resettlement and integration all throughout our state. He has over 16 years of experience in child welfare, public assistance, and other social welfare programs. Pleasure to welcome you, Ben, today.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Next, we welcome Mihaela Mitrofan, who's Director of New American Programs at Samaritas. In April 2022, she traveled to Romania and the border of Ukraine on a humanitarian mission. And that is where she rolled up her sleeves to work with NGOs, human service organizations, and other congregations near the border of that conflict, working to distribute humanitarian aid to displaced refugees. So we'll be very interested in hearing more, Mihaela, about your experiences there. Welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you, Cynthia.
And we welcome Demetrius Starling. He is the Executive Director for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services Children's Services Agency, the CSA. And as part of that, he oversees Michigan's child welfare system, including CPS, Children's Protective Services, the foster care system, adoption services, family preservation services, and juvenile justice program. Demetrius, welcome. As an adoptee, I feel like I'm seen and heard by what you represent today. So good to have you with us.
Good morning, Cynthia. Thanks for having me.
We are all here today, World Refugee Day. Certainly there's been so much attention focused on what is happening at our southern border, but I think it's important to recognize that with more and more global conflicts and extreme climate changes, there are people in countries who are working their way to the United States of America who will never be able to go home again. So our questions to explore: how do we handle these waves of families and individuals of all ages? How do we keep them safe? How are communities here in Michigan being affected by making room for these new residents, these new migrants? So we have a lot to talk about. I think before we dig into these questions, it's important to get on the same page with regard to terminology. Mihaela, if you would explain for us the differences in the terms that we hear tossed about perhaps too loosely: immigrant, refugee, asylum seeker, migrant. Can you help us sort out the nuances and the differences?
Yeah, there are several ways people arrive to the U.S. seeking protection and a pathway to integrate in our community. We hear all those terms you mentioned, Cynthia: refugee, asylum seeker, migrants, humanitarian parolees, entrants. And these are individuals, right? They are human beings who arrive in our country in a variety of ways. Department of State Reception and Placement Program, which is one of the most structured refugee programs, can take several years. However, some fleeing persecution and very heavy situations are crossing the border, and they are making their way to different states, reuniting with family members. We can also learn about visa overstays or visitors, students who are under student visas. However, what is important to understand is that refugees and many individuals from the categories that I mentioned, they have no home to return to, and sending them home puts their life in danger. Immigrants, on the other hand, right, they are individuals who make a decision to leave their country and seek better opportunities or reunite with family. So I think it's very important to make that distinction, and knowing the differences between refugees and immigrants is crucial for providing appropriate services, legal protections, humanitarian assistance, integration support, and fostering international cooperation as well. Such understanding allows our society to respond effectively to the needs of both refugees and immigrants, and promoting that inclusivity and dignity that shows our respect for human rights.
It certainly seems understanding and appreciating the differences can help anyone maybe break through the flood of cable news and stories and the flood of information that we get nonstop, because it doesn't always recognize those nuances.
Absolutely.
Ben, from where you sit as state refugee coordinator, I think you're in a good position to help bust some myths. I think it's pretty easy for folks in Michigan to kind of fall into the thinking that migrants and refugees aren't so much a presence in our state. We're not a southern border state, or we are oceans away from the kinds of political danger and severe climate change that maybe, let's say, force people to flee from countries in Africa, or we're nowhere near the ongoing war with Ukraine. In terms of the numbers of refugees and migrants and asylum seekers that we're seeing in Michigan, where do we stand as compared to other states?
Yeah, I mean, Michigan has always been, I think a very welcoming state, and has always, kind of led the effort, led the charge to, try and create welcoming atmosphere and welcoming communities. And so we are, over the last decade, have been, one of the top 5 states for refugee resettlement, with individuals coming from overseas through the refugee processing, on that program. And now I've seen a real uptick as well, with regards to individuals seeking, these other pathways. Mihaela put it really well. These are individuals, these are humans, that are all, seeking a lot of the same sort of safety and protections, regardless of their circumstances and how they arrive. So, I mean, Michigan, as I said, has kind of always been near the top 5, top 10 in all these different categories. And in the last year, to give a very sort of specific number, we welcomed a little over 6,000 individuals to Michigan, seeking that sort of humanitarian response and need.
Broadly speaking, if you were to graph the influx of these refugees and migrants and immigrants coming into Michigan, are we going up? Are we going down? Are we stable? Where are we at?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely going up. There's, definitely some both changes in a lot of, like, the ramifications of the Ukraine war and, the fall of Kabul and Afghanistan. A lot of, really troubling things happening in Central and South America for individuals, and they're seeking safety as a result. And so the current administration at the federal level has, put a lot of new opportunities in place to, try and address those needs. So we're definitely trending up, but, in this work, I think we've always seen some dips and, valleys and peaks and, this work for sure. But as a whole, the U.S. has historically been very responsive to the needs across the world, and we're trending, in my opinion, the right direction.
Demetrius, darling, we have you here to help us shift focus to the children, the young people in Michigan who are in immigrant families. I saw one figure that said around 300,000 children in Michigan are in immigrant families. Not all of them are refugees, but many are. What do these youngsters need, and what are your biggest challenges at the state level to providing their help for them?
Yeah, good question. I think that when you think about the refugee population in Michigan, especially our young adults, refugees, and migrants remain really some of our most vulnerable population. And, when you think about the fact that a population is faced often with xenophobia, discrimination, poor living conditions, housing conditions, I think it's important for our department to ensure that we really lean into some of those disparities to ensure that those kids and families are well taken care of. Also, from the Department of Health and Human Services perspective, one of our huge concerns is in regards to some of that undocumented, kind of covert population that sometimes can find themselves in human trafficking conditions. And so, as we all know, human trafficking is also not just a sex-related issue. I think that that's one piece that really gets highlighted in either the media or in some of the communications you see across the state, but also from a labor perspective. So yes, sexual exploitation is really one large piece of that, but the labor force is one thing that we are starting to have a huge concern with in regards to some of our older youth that are coming over to Michigan, are undocumented, and those young folks, unfortunately, are found to be a part of a population that's working for our textile industries, some of our recycling plants, even some of our small plants that provide parts and pieces to some of the larger corporations, and us really having to vet that out. And, just wanted to really relate to the public. If you see something, say something, because again, that's a part of the population that unfortunately is hidden. And sometimes it's a situation where those kids come to our attention really late in our systems before they're part of, really large organizations. It is hard for us to really wrap our arms around them.
So to that point, what should people watch for? Neighbors, fellow employees, teachers? What kinds of warning signs might they be aware of, and to whom should they report?
Absolutely, great question. So, I think when you have young adults, specifically in your community, that are looking disheveled, maybe you see them in the public during normal school hours, they don't seem to be without adult supervision. We will hope that folks feel compelled to call into our department and let the department make a determination on if that complaint should be assigned for investigation. Our department takes the allegations raised in these reports very seriously, and we're working closely with others like Ben and other organizations and appropriate state and federal partners to ensure that the Michigan organizations are in compliance with state laws and also that children are protected. So if and when you see something, Michigan residents, I will hope that you call our number, which is 855-944-3911. I'm sorry.
And we'll make sure that we have that sent. We're going to be sending information to everybody who's part of this webinar. So just one more time, that number, it's worth jotting down and remembering.
And I'll make sure that I put that in the chat box as well.
That's great. That's great. Ben, I think there are, speaking of mythbusters here, a lot of people who believe that a refugee is completely supported by the government indefinitely. Tell us, what is the real story? What happens once refugees make their way and asylum seekers make their way to Michigan?
Sure. Yeah, I know this is a somewhat common misconception, I think, as you said. Certainly refugees need some support upon their arrival and during their integration to the U.S. The families have literally had to leave everything behind. So refugees are often losing access to many public benefits relatively quickly because of the jobs that they are attaining. We see extremely high retention rates in their employment. Once they're placed in jobs, employer partners are always excited to work with our office and our agency partners like Samaritas on employment placements because of the hard work, dedication, and the retention of immigrants in their job placements. And I think another thing people sometimes get wrong is the concept of refugees and some other immigrant populations wanting to be in the U.S. and somehow taking something from natural-born citizens. For many immigrants, they want nothing more than to be able to live at peace in their home country. Leaving and ultimately coming to the U.S. really was a last resort. But they successfully make a new home here. They adopt the U.S. as their new country with grace, resilience, and despite the circumstances that really have been forced upon them. And so, as I said before, they bring talents, they create jobs, and they add value to our communities, I think, in immeasurable ways.
Go ahead. Yes, go.
Yeah, just a thought here. I really like the fact that Ben emphasized how short that public assistance is. I mean, we are looking at 8 months to up to 48 months, and that is a lifetime time frame that refugees can access public benefits. However, what is important to highlight here is the fact that during that time, refugees are required to engage in job search activities. They are required to learn English, to gain financial and digital literacy skills. So we keep them quite busy with a lot of activities that prepare them for success and launching into the job market and attaining well-gaining jobs that help them become self-sufficient.
I want to open this to all of you just to broaden this out a little bit. What from where you all sit, what do you see as the biggest challenges and misconceptions that refugees face when they come to our state? What do you think, Ben? I know we've busted a couple myths, but what are some other misconceptions or roadblocks or challenges that folks face? Clearly, language is got to be a start.
Yeah, certainly language is a definite challenge, and there's things that Samaritas, as well as other partners that we work with, do to help break that down. We're doing it, I think, in some really unique ways in Michigan, which I, can expound on if interested. But in addition to that, I think it's just navigating complex social systems. There's a lot of ways that we operate in the U.S. that other countries don't operate. So learning a new language while trying to figure out, how to navigate those social systems and safety nets and creating social capital for yourself, finding housing and dealing with everything that comes with owning or renting a home in the US. Those are all really unique things when you're overcoming, a really hard situation that these families have just gone through, in addition to, entering new employment and everything. You hear a lot about like the different kinds of stressors in life, job change, home change, and these folks have, experienced all those things at once in a lot of instances, and, have to navigate all of that while learning a new language and, a new country systems.
And also from my chair, I believe that, as we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has posed great issues for us across our nation. And so those additional challenges that those folks who are coming into America are up against really makes their transition at times a little bit more difficult. When you talk about the fact that they have already had highlighted inequities and access to utilization of either mental health services or health services, and then trying to come to America to, work through language barriers and also access to those services. Some of the things, the myths that we have to knock down is that folks who are coming from other countries are utilizing or taking all the resources from folks within our state. And that's something that, we've heard across the board, like, these folks are moving to the front of the line and, their needs are more important or paramount than the kids within Michigan, which is a total misconception. It's a myth. Refugees and migrants, have suffered really negative social impacts within their travel restrictions in the first place. So yes, we want to make sure that we really lean into what services and supports they need, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to, quote unquote, move into the front of the line. That is a population that is at risk, of course. We have an obligation to assist and provide services to those refugee populations and migrant services as well. But it doesn't mean that we are going to, for lack of a better term, rob Peter to pay Paul. All of our folks who are most at risk within our state are going to receive adequate supports and services across the board. So I think that's one of the misnomers that we constantly have to tamp down on our communities that we engage, especially when it comes to migrant services.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up. And you have to stop and say, when you hear they're taking away from us and our opportunities. When you talk to any small business owner about the terrible trouble they're having finding workers. I was having that conversation with someone yesterday who has his own small business and said, if you have no idea how hard it is. So it isn't like there are not opportunities out there begging for people to step up and take these jobs. Mihaela, what about, from what you've seen, how much more complicated is this when you're dealing with the youngsters? And I wonder if they also are a pathway. I'm thinking of a family who fled from Homs, Syria, that when I was with Michigan Radio, we went to their new home in Dearborn. They were thrilled at the idea that you could actually walk down the street and be safe. Not worry about the police coming and taking your cell phone and then grabbing contacts, all of those that went with it. But it seemed to me that the key to help them integrate was going to be their little girl who was going to school and was starting to pick up English right away. And I could really see where she was going to be quite a conduit for her mother, who was in the home, to kind of help get integrated.
Yeah, you're touching on several key aspects of what the resettlement journey looks like. There is a lot asked of refugees. The reception and placement program specifically has a very short time frame. We have a short 3 months of helping refugees get stabilized and just getting them on their feet with finding housing, finding employment, navigating the new community, getting their kids enrolled in school, learning about finances, how you open a checking account, and how you manage a family budget with the little you have. And it's amazing how much refugees are able to absorb in those first few months. I also want to highlight, there is a level of pressure that is put on the younger generation of refugees, right? Because they learn the language quickly, they are making friends in school, neighbors, and oftentimes they act as social brokers for their family, parents and elderly, and also they are put in situations when they need to interpret for the family quite sensitive information. So I want to just acknowledge the work of the refugee resettlement agencies and other service organizations that engage with the entire refugee resettlement ecosystem that supports with this process. And the journey doesn't end at 90 days, right? I mean, we are looking at a couple of years, and the 5-year mark is really a very important mark where refugees who in the meantime can adjust their status and obtain a green card. So they are becoming legal permanent residents. And then at 5-year mark, they are eligible to apply for citizenship or US naturalization. And we see an overwhelming percentage of refugees and others in our care who are seeking that opportunity and feeling honored that they can integrate in that way and contribute to our society.
Being having been present at a naturalization ceremony in a Detroit courtroom, it is very moving to see what it means to these new Americans, something that maybe it's easy if you've been born into it to kind of just take it for, I don't want to use the word take it for granted, but it's just part of everything. But to see the emotions of these new citizens at the naturalization ceremonies, it is something else. Ben, I want you to go a little deeper on something you touched on. Give us some, you said you can get into this for us. What is Michigan doing to improve oversight for new Americans who are trying to get into the job market and to get these jobs that these employers are trying to fill?
Yeah, I mean, well, when you introduced me, you mentioned, I'm with Office of Global Michigan. We do live within the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. And so, we're able to work very closely and interact with, our labor colleagues, wage and hour, MIOSHA, all of the sort of protections and creation of economic opportunity in the state. And we're really supporting employment placement as well as laddering opportunities and skill development, through our own office, through partnerships with Samaritas and other local agencies. We have a really exciting program where we're working with employers on building digital literacy skills and using that as a part of improving like English language acquisition. We have a very close working partnership with our Michigan Works agencies and providing job coaching and skill development for refugees and other newcomers. And really have seen a lot of excitement. You mentioned like small local business owners and the their recognition of the need and partnership in immigrants filling labor gaps and providing that level of support. And I talked about the excitement of employers for the dedication and retention of the populations we serve, and really seen some exciting opportunities to build new employer partnerships. And create those unique opportunities and them being able to, like I said, create their own jobs and bring in either family members or friends that they know will fill really good vacancies as well in those local markets within the state.
If you have, go ahead. Yes.
Just as one of the contractors with the state of Michigan, I have this privilege of sitting at the front row and leading my team operating a robust workforce development program and economic empowerment. And it's amazing to track the outcomes of our team's efforts. I mean, we are looking at average wages for more than $18 per hour, refugees working a lot of overtime in jobs ranging from entry level, the low skilled jobs, all the way to the very high, highly sophisticated opportunities, and they contribute with their skills. I also want to highlight that we see this trend across all the refugee groups that we work with. I mean, we are talking about Ukrainians, Afghans, Syrian refugees, Iraqi refugees, and Cubans as well. So the general trend is that more than 75% of them are self-sufficient by 180 days of arrival, which is amazing.
It is. In fact, I think it's probably worth passing the information along for, let's say, for small business owners who aren't aware. How do they tap into this labor pool, this prospective labor pool? Where might they go?
Yeah, Samaritas has all the information available on our website, samaritas.org. We are currently working on an exciting opportunity to engage with employers by providing a platform where employers can reach out directly to us and filling their job opportunities information. And then our team works on matching refugees with those skills and helping partner with employers. So quite exciting, and that should be coming out soon.
That should be good. Ben or Demetrius, any suggestions for employers who would love to get some hands in on board?
Absolutely. I love the information that Mihaela is sharing. And so we all know there are several phrases associated with the Statue of Liberty, but one of the most recognizable is, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. And when I think about that, I can't help but to think about the great symbiotic relationship that the department has with Samaritas and folks within Ben's shop to really lean into some of the disparities that lead to disproportionalities in our systems. So again, when you think about lack of stable housing, lack of access to a good prevailing wage job, lack of access to mental health services, food insecurity, things of that nature, to think about the great work that they're doing in conjunction with the department to make sure that refugees and migrants who are coming over to America and to Michigan more specifically are linked to those services is extremely important and critical. So our department is really looking at different opportunities that we can find vendors or businesses that are in our communities to say, hey, we want to make sure that, we provide as much support and guidance to these families, because we know that if, they can have access to housing and have access to good, stable jobs, then that's a very good chance that these kids don't come to our attention because they're being well taken care of by our system. So I really love the great symbiotic relationship that's going on. And we're working, of course, with the Small Business Association of America, met with them a couple of times to see if there are different opportunities to also make sure that we have job readiness programs in place or access to those good prevailing wage jobs for this particular population.
And did you want to add anything as far as where employers could turn to?
Yeah, we can make sure we share, to share out the information. Like you mentioned the phone number before, we have a general email inbox that employers can reach out if they have, obviously like Samaritas has direct opportunities, but we also often answer like just technical assistance questions as well about like employing immigrants and, some of the visa opportunities and all of those kinds of things as well. So we can make sure to share out that inbox.
Very good. If you have just joined us, let me just reintroduce our panel. We're very happy you are with us for this Samaritas Refugee Roundtable as we mark World Refugee Day. Speaking with Ben Kavanaugh, who's Deputy Director and State Refugee Coordinator, Office of Global Michigan, the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. We have Mihaela Mitrofan, who's Director of New American Services for Samaritas. And Demetrius Starling is Executive Director, Michigan Health and Human Services Children's Services Agency. I feel it is very safe to note that migrants and refugees and asylum seekers are in the hot spotlight in terms of broadcast news coverage or pundits weighing in on cable TV, certainly political rhetoric. But I feel like the photos and video footage and all of the politicians with their takes, in all of that, we aren't getting a clear enough understanding of what forces can drive people to flee their homes. So we've talked some about how refugees get here to Michigan. Let's talk about why. And Mihaela, I'd like to start with you because you were there firsthand last year working near the border with Romania and Ukraine and working with displaced refugees. And it's something that this world has not seen since World War II. So give us some insights. What did you learn? What surprised you?
I want to say that the picture was quite interesting. A beautiful country with beautiful landscape, a lot of richness, and the war was just advancing to different areas and devastating the communities and the structure of the Ukrainian economy and society overall. I met a lot of Ukrainians and they were fleeing. They were actually running on streets, seeking shelter, seeking a place to live and transition and figure out what's next for them. It's been a year, but those memories and those images, those visuals are so vivid in my heart and my mind that just the young kids, the elderly. I visited a school that was transformed as a shelter and a very large room where maybe a couple of months before kids were playing. They had some makeshift beds out of cardboard boxes and a thin mattress, and about 8 or 10 elderly women were sleeping in that room, and they were sharing their clothes and their few possessions they brought with them. That is the reality of war, and it's so unfortunate that is still going on, and not just in Ukraine, but in so many places. Central America, and speaking about migrants and the children that are crossing the border, if we can just take a minute to think, what can those parents be experiencing to make that decision to send their kids with strangers or alone, making that atrocious journey and just not being sure if they will ever see them again, versus keeping them with them there, where they could be recruited by gangs and being victims of violence and all that bad happening there. I just recently read some comments about the northern part of Central America being one of the most dangerous places on earth, and it was very shattering to hear that, to see that note.
And Ben, as state refugee coordinator, what has surprised you? What have you learned about what impels people to make that I think, Mihaela, you put it well, that atrocious and desperate journey to enter the U.S. and then come here to Michigan to try to make a new home?
Yeah, I think, I said earlier that, most of the individuals, we meet in this work, they weren't looking to come to the U.S. It was a last resort. And they have great pride in their country, in their home, and where they originated from. So it just speaks to the desperation, the conditions of some of those countries, of what they see happening for their children. And we hear an awful lot of refugees say that they don't necessarily care about their first job or their ongoing job and what happens with them. That their main concern is that they've created opportunity for their children to have a better chance and a better next step in their life. And so I think it really is a driving factor, and it's speaks volumes about like the reason and the need for the continued efforts of countries like the U.S. and others around the world to provide that safe haven when people need it. And Mihaela spoke to it, like what we're seeing happening in Central and South America and Haiti right now is like conditions are not livable. Whether you're talking about the economy or what people are going through to protect their families. And so it's totally understandable that people would feel the need and desperation to seek other opportunities.
And of course, we know that they are easy prey for smugglers. And this is not even just south of the border. There was just a report this morning, a horrible boat overturning with refugees drowning off the coast of Greece, people who had been told by the smugglers, you have to pay me $4,000. You can't bring food. There'll be food on the boat. They took everything that the people had and threw it overboard. And then there were only a couple of survivors. This is just echoing around the world. But I want to kind of circle back to something we touched on, but I think it's still worth expanding on about what these refugees and migrants can bring to Michigan and what they could mean to communities around the states. We've certainly seen immigrants and refugees thriving and contributing to cities such as Dearborn and Hamtramck in Southeast Michigan. Let's talk about what we could be seeing or are seeing in other parts of the state as far as what they can bring. I'll make that a jump ball question. Whoever wants in, pipe up.
Sure, I'll jump in. So we talked for a few minutes about economic contributions, but what does that mean, right? I mean, refugees spend money, they invest money, they pay taxes, they start businesses, they create jobs, and all that helps stimulate economic growth and development. Another aspect is enriching the cultural diversity of our region and contributing to a vibrant and multicultural society. That diversity can enhance the creativity, it can foster understanding and promote cultural exchange. We talked about employment a bit, but I want to highlight that contribution to filling labor market needs, particularly in industries where there is a demand for skilled or low-skilled workers. Their presence can help economic growth and maintain essential services. Many of our refugees were working during the pandemic because they fill those critically needed positions. Population growth is another aspect. As Michigan experiences population decline, accepting refugees and immigrants and helping them integrate can help offset the demographic shifts by providing a younger and more diverse population and engaging them. The entrepreneurial drive of refugees and immigrants is just something so encouraging to see, and the risk-taking. Many of our refugee clients, as they pick up on how economy works and they gain financial skills and with the English vocabulary needed to express their ideas, they come up with the most ingenious opportunities. I mean, I'm in Southeast Michigan, and just thinking about the Macomb corridor around the Quinn Ryan roads. I mean, just driving a couple of months and you find a variety of stores and restaurants. Dearborn, similarly, the amazing food that, I think any of us who have guests out of town enjoy the opportunity to showcase the diversity of our cuisines. I think I'll stop here. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think I can add anything more than that. I think that was eloquently stated. Of course, refugees bring that sense of productivity to their host communities, their host countries, where they are integrated into various communities. And even when you think about, for instance, in Detroit with the Hamtramck area, and you see how thriving that area is, and how you have so many different diverse populations and backgrounds, and how they're able to work collectively to have this sense of community more so than other regions. I think it's a thing of beauty, and really kind of helps enrich our local communities and creating, again, that sense of cultural diversity within their local population. And even years after their settlement, refugees continue to stimulate the economy. Again, when you look at all the bakeries and different, companies that are thriving and growing in that particular community. For instance, my daughter recently took her driver's ed test over in Hamtramck. And so while she was taking her driver's ed test, I just, perused the the community, and I saw so many different backgrounds of businesses, whether it be insurance companies or local repair shops, and they have this strong sense of this is our country as well. And the way that they've been able to mesh that particular community and boost their economic activity and increase wages for folks who are continuously coming to our country is truly amazing. They just complement the job market, in that particular region, the way they're able to settle in, boost their high rates of entrepreneurship and creating jobs. So we can mimic that throughout the state. I think that would be a thing of beauty to see come to fruition.
In early May, the pandemic measures known as Title 42 were lifted. As we've all heard, these measures were imposed during the Trump administration during the COVID pandemic, with an idea of slowing down immigration because it denied most migrants the opportunity to make claims for protection. So that expired in early May. There was a lot of ink and a lot of airtime used up leading up to that, to the run up to that, predicting there would be a mass influx of migrants at our southern border when Title 42 ended. Did that happen? Here we are, almost 2 months out from that lifting, month and a half. Has there been the predicted effect?
No, not really. I mean, there was a need, I think, as Title 42 lifted, there was a need for a return to some previous procedural requirements at the border, as well as, a number of new initiatives and measures for sort of addressing the flow of arrivals at the southern border were put in place. As you said, there's a really anticipated large surge, but I think a lot of sort of strict messaging around, the shifts to other border policies, as well as, the other opportunities created for individuals to apply for other safe pathways to enter the U.S. really has stemmed that anticipated large influx and flow, and numbers have actually dramatically reduced with regards to actual encounters at the border since Title 42 lifted, and they reverted back to what's covered under Title 8. And there's been a lot of applications for people to come through other means, like I mentioned, other safe pathways to come to the U.S., but definitely the flow of migrants to the actual border has decreased.
Mahela, Samaritas has an infrastructure in place to help resettle refugees. We should remind everybody it's been doing that in this state for nearly a century. Is this infrastructure sturdy enough to manage the influx of refugees into Michigan? How healthy is that infrastructure?
Yeah, I'll need to mention what the resettlement agencies have experienced just a few years ago under the previous administration, and it's hard to bring those times back in memory, but resettlement programs and overall refugee services were heavily impacted and almost decimated. So with the loss of funding, a lot of talent went out the door, and scaling up our programming and recalibrating and pivoting to this new opportunity to expand our program has its growing pains. However, Samaritas, as an organization committed to do this work, this legacy work for decades, has kept the key infrastructure in place. Of course, the pandemic brought some challenges, and we continue to deal with staffing shortages and challenges with recruiting talent, and retention sometimes can be an issue. However, these opportunities we explore them with great excitement, and the partnership with the federal government, the state government, counties, cities places us at the top as far as visioning and creating that strategy for growth. as I mentioned, the 90 days are just that initial time frame. However, there is work ahead of us with each and every refugee, and the newer categories also impact our work, right? We talked about Ukrainians, we talk about Afghans who are admitted and are admitted legally in our region, and those individuals bring a bit of pressure on the existing infrastructure. The good side of this situation is that funding follows refugee arrivals, and we are able to design additional programs and expand our service area to accommodate the influx of refugees. So excitingly, we are looking for opportunities to partner with landlords, with different landlord associations, and other exploring creative ideas to develop affordable housing programming, and also uncovering the homes that are in need of rehab or a bit of TLC, and preparing them for refugee arrivals.
We actually, one of our viewers has a question that I was going to ask, so it's perfect timing. I might call this the call to action. What can the average person who's not real plugged into all of this but wants to help, how can they help? How can they best help? Ben, do you want to start from where you sit as state refugee coordinator? What can the average person do to help make Michigan a welcoming place for these migrants and refugees?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing I always tell people is to educate themselves. Like you've pointed out a lot with regards to what is promoted and shared on media, and sometimes is like the line, the top line grabbers or whatever. But I think educating yourself on the real issues, we're always happy to have people reach out to our office and help provide some of that education and advocacy and awareness. And then, there's a lot of different opportunities, which I know Samaritas will want to speak to, that they can help provide support locally through volunteer efforts or even monetarily. But there's also a lot of opportunities right now for, all of the individuals seeking other ways to come to the U.S. Through a myriad of sponsorship programs that individuals can step forward to, actually sponsor refugee families. So if people are interested in something like that, they can reach out to our office as well. And then lastly, I think, the employers, like you mentioned, reaching out to our office or Samaritas, or other local partners, providing employment placements, as well as that housing need is huge right now. So there's a lot of opportunities. We're happy to point in the right direction in any of these instances. And I think it varies a little bit. Sometimes, we try to take a lead on some of that sometimes because it varies a lot based on individuals' needs and, how they're arriving to the U.S. We've talked a lot about that, and there's always confusion about people's status and what they're eligible for, and always happy to help navigate that.
That is complicated. And one of you, I forget who, talked about even some of these young folks, young people, children, toddlers arriving alone. And we had a question: what happens when kids get to Michigan? And it occurs to me there's probably, Demetrius, there's a need for foster homes and people willing to open up their homes to these young people.
Absolutely. So when a minor child who is not accompanied by a parent or a legal guardian is apprehended by immigration authorities, the child is transferred to the care and custody of the Office of Refugee Settlement. And as a result, typically there's either a relative or parent who can care for the child while the immigration case is being processed. So the sponsor must agree to cooperate with all immigration proceedings. And that within itself sometimes poses a challenge, because I can see how certain populations or demographics are really, hesitant and have anxiety to work with the government. So it's incumbent on our department to make sure that they understand that we're not there to dismantle that home, or we're there to kind of help with the transition of that youth or child or children when they're in that particular situation. So again, when some of the reasons that these kids come into those particular situations is that they're trying to escape violence and abuse and persecution from the country that they're leaving, and to find family members who are residing in the United States to help seek that support. So we want to make sure that we're there to be of support and not to, again, dismantle what they have going on. But also within our unaccompanied refugee program, we ensure that the population receives the full range of assistance, care, and services that are available to foster children in the state by establishing that legal authority. So if and when we can, and make sure that we are vetting out the family members, making sure that we're looking at potential foster homes for these kids. The programs encourage reunification of the children first and foremost, if and when possible, through family tracing and coordination. But if that's not possible, we make sure that we have a safe, loving home for that child. So there's definitely a need for foster homes. I think this is my time that I can give my obligatory plug that if and when you are interested in becoming a foster parent, just hope that you reach out to www.michigan.gov/home, hope for a home. Again, www.michigan.gov/hope for a home. And again, these are children that, for the most part, are refugees. Their family has sought asylum. They may have been victims of human trafficking. So we want to make sure that we make the appropriate placement of those kids in the right homes. And lastly, I would say that we've really, as a department, stepped it up to reach out to vendors who can establish homes or facilities for kids who have been a part of human trafficking rings, whether it be sex or labor trafficking. Right now, we have a handful of providers across the state really trying to get that, see an uptick in that. Samaritas has been an amazing partner on the front end to help with some of the reintegration processes of our kids. But for the most part, human trafficking, sex or labor trafficking has really been an area that we haven't seen as many homes or facilities that could take those kids in at the time. So really looking at more creative ways to reach out to those vendors. And additionally, within my department, we have a human trafficking analyst that I was fortunate enough to hire over the past several months to help with some of that messaging, the training about the signs of human trafficking, and also, have that be that conduit to some of our private vendors who want to really venture into this workforce.
Mahila, anything you want to add to that? What can the average person who cares do to help?
Yeah, Ben mentioned education and advocacy, and I think that is a very important responsibility that each of us have, right? Learning about what this is all about and just telling the story. I mean, there are so many examples of all we discuss, right? The economic contribution, the successful stories. But to move things to a very practical way, I want to highlight one of our signature program, which is our co-sponsorship or the Welcome Teams program, where congregations or small groups which are organized can join our organization and walk alongside the newly arrived family. That program is designed for 6 months, and volunteers who need to go through a vetting process and training and orientation about what this means. They have an amazing opportunity to watch the integration story of our refugee families. We invite as many organizations and congregations as possible, because we are looking at a high arrival summer and next 2 fiscal years. Landlords, we talked a bit about housing, but I really want to emphasize that housing can be quite a challenge to uncover those homes that are out there, and we need to access them, right? And landlord getting to know us, right, and building trust in the work we do, and refugees who they might not have a credit history or might not be employed right as soon as arrival, but they have the backing of the resettlement agencies, services, and commitment to help them become self-sufficient as quickly as possible. and of course, monetary donations. This work takes a lot of effort and talent, and oftentimes the contracts, federal contracts, state contracts, confine us within very specific boundaries. And I just have a brief example, Cynthia. A couple of weeks ago, we received a call from one of the local TV stations about an individual from Venezuela. And he was at the airport. He flew from another state and he was in need of housing. The call came to Samaritas, although he's not a refugee, like, in the technical sense. But we got the call and our team jumped to the task, and they found housing with donations from a congregation, a couple of volunteers, and we are looking at helping this individual receive legal status and be able to just be plugged into other services. So thanks for the opportunity.
As we start to wind down, because we are getting unbelievably close to the end of our session, I'd love to ask each of you, what's the most rewarding part of this work that you do? What gets you up each day and roll up your sleeves and ready to do it again? Ben?
I think from my chair, just being able to really show and demonstrate that safety and protection of our most vulnerable youth is really paramount for us. And when you see some of the startling numbers in regards to human trafficking, I think it's really important for us as a department to really provide the resources to this and make sure that it's not a bane of our existence going forward. So for me, just making sure that the kids who are coming to Michigan who may have language barriers, who may have social barriers, who may not have that same sense of connectivity to our country than other kids, and making sure that, we're there for them through the thick and thin, and making sure that they understand that they are part of our community is really rewarding. It's really refreshing. And also to see some of the community output. I think, Mihaela, you talked about some of the faith-based initiatives, but what I've seen and heard from different communities, not only faith-based folks, but also, county administrators, folks within school systems, and how they really want to step up and be the eyes and ears of the community, and how they can assist with these families, not only the youth, but the families overall in their transition to our country, has been nothing short of amazing. So that gives me a lot of hope in our society.
Ben, what lights your fire in this work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, what it always, you said what gets you up in the morning. I mean, it's just this work, I think, provides perspective. What we think are, I call first world problems, what we think are challenges and the things that maybe get us down, not to, dilute that. Everybody has their thing and their challenges, but, it's really helpful to me, it's provided such perspective in my life about what is going on in the world, and about what real struggle is, about what people face. And to Demetrius's point about just being a harbor in the storm, and trying to build that in Michigan is definitely an inspiration for me.
And finally, Mihaela.
Yeah, it is the opportunity to, I would say, save lives and help refugees not just arrive in our community, but thrive. I mean, we see that journey, and I have to show this. It's for little girls like Miriam and her parents. Miriam experienced hearing loss in Syria, and through the help of our organization, volunteers, and the community, the medical practitioner that helped her voluntarily, she got an ear transplant, and she's able to hear and just engage with her friends. And I have many stories, Cynthia. I just don't want to take the time, but it's a very rewarding profession, and that keeps me going for more than 28 years.
We want to wrap up by thanking everybody who has been watching us and joining us today. And we hope you found this roundtable on World Refugee Day to be helpful, informative, and challenging. And on behalf of Samaritas, let me offer deepest thanks to our panel, Ben Kavanaugh and Demetria Starling from the state of Michigan, and Mihaela Mitrofan of Samaritas. And we want to remind all of you, check your email later today, because you'll be getting more information about refugees in Michigan and how you can help solve some of the challenges. We'll send that to you, and it'll have the resources that were mentioned by our guest today. So you'll know where to turn, whether it is to perhaps offer your home, perhaps it is you're looking for employees, and maybe there's a way of matching your needs with folks who are looking for work. So we'll be sending those resources to you. And as always, you can check out Samaritas easily by going to samaritas.org/New Americans. Samaritas.org/New Americans. Thank you to our panel. It has been wonderful spending this hour with all of you, and thanks to you who joined us. I'm Cynthia Canty, and marking World Refugee Day, it was good to spend it with you. Goodbye.